I might show up by the last few minutes of the year. I just don't want to miss it if I need to. So I'm going to be on.
Okay. All your tests should be matzliach. Okay, so let's get started. Great. Ashkeshinu, all your tests should be matzliach. Okay, now I have another problem. 1 second. Okay, so let's get started. Okay. Okay, now I have enough. Okay, now we can get started again. Okay. Ashkechinu Mar Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Bar Barchan. Mar Yehuda encountered Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Bar Barchana, Davakaima Apischa Devei Rabbi. They were at the opening of the doorway of Rabbi's house. And that's where they started schmoozing and learning. Amar Lahu, he told to them. So Mar Yehuda told them, Tanya, we learned, Hamakadish bepetach amar, bebasa b'cholov, uv'chulun shenishchatu ba'azara, Rabbi Shimon Aimer mukudeshes. So Rabbi Shimon is clearly arguing on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says these are Issur Hano, and Rabbi Shimon, and here we're quoting Rabbi Shimon that's saying they're not. So let's stop for a moment. Petach amar, Rashi told us, we just learned yesterday that Rabbi Shimon argues with the Chachamim, and he says before the animal is actually destroyed, while it's still alive, Rabbi Shimon held that it was mutar b'hana. And since Rabbi Shimon held it was mutar b'hana, we could be speaking here about a petach hamar while it's still alive. Basa b'chalav, we had a shita who held that basa b'chalav was mutar b'hana. So that would explain Rabbi Shimon as to why it's a good Kiddushin. That's where we're going to have to get an understanding, because we just learned it took him to say that the Issur of Chulun Shenishchatu B'Azara and the Issur Hana applies across the board. So we'll have to see what the Shita of Rabbi Shimon is about Chulun Shenishchatu B'Azara. Alma, you see from here that Chulun Shenishchatu B'Azara, the Rabbi Shimon Lav D'Oraisa. So the Gemara right about tells us the reason why it's not Asur B'Hana is because the Issur is not Midoraisa. As Rashi says, Kasabar Issur Lav D'Oraisa, Lo Issur Shchitasai, V'lo Issur Hanaasai. There's no Issur Shchita. In other words, there's no Issur Midoraisa to Shech Chulun B'Azara, and there's no Issur Hana. V'lo Darsh B'Richuk Machin Hachi. He doesn't darshan how we darshan. That B'Richuk Machin Atar Zeveach, V'Yatar Zeveach, B'Kiruv Machin, which is how we learned the Issur of Chulun B'Azara yesterday. Elam Midrabanan. He holds the reason why you shouldn't shech Chulun B'Azara is only Midrabanan to Gzeira. What is Gzeira? If you shech Chulun B'Azara and then you eat it, Dilma Asalamemer, people are going to think that, hey, maybe this was kosher. If you're shechting something in the Azara, it's pretty normal for someone to think that it's kosher that you shechted. And they'll think that it's kosher shenifsalu la'achar shchitahin. They'll think that this must be kosher that became possible after shchita. Shaloi nizak daman. We know that has to be burnt. But they'll think that it's psula kosher, that's why he ate it. He even eats it out of the Beis HaMikdash. And people are enjoying that meat. And therefore, people are going to think that even if a carbon had a psul in the middle, you can eat the meat. From kachim, that they had not yet done the zrika. Because of that, they made a drabanan that it's also the shech kulam bazar. Okay, Gavalt. We're many fact Gemara. Rabbi Shimon Aimer kulam shenishchadu bazar yisruf. Why is it needed to be burnt? Rashi's v'loy sagir lo b'kfura. You can't just bury it because midiraisa there's no issur at all. Al meisurim min haTorah. That must be also min haTorah. The imidir abanon. If the whole issur to shech kulun lazar is only midrabanan. Mi machmarinon kula hai. Would you be machmer to make you burn it after it was done? It's only also midrabanan. Nehi de behema gozer atu psula mekdashim. I would even accept that if you shechted a behema bazara that was chulin, there maybe I would accept that you should burn it, so it shouldn't be confused with kachim. If we only said bury and not burn, people will think that that's what you do with kachim that became possible. But we know that kachim that are possible have to be burned. Alachaya, because I didn't read the next line in the Gemara. The chein chaya shenishkata bazara is also yisrif. Alachaya Issur dida lav daraisa. If really there's no Issur daraisa to shechta chaya of chulin in dazara, no one's going to confuse that with kachim because it's a chaya. You can't be choshed that if someone shechts a chaya and then buries it instead of burning it, people are going to think that by kachim you don't have to bury, you don't have to burn. So therefore, why do they have to say that if one shechts a chaya chulin bazara, it has to be burnt? If you think about it, why doesn't it even need kfura? No one's going to mix up chaya with a behema. No one's going to think that kachim, carbon that got puzzled, you don't have to burn. Elavadai, from the fact that Reb Shimon said that it's yisrafu, it must be Issur in Minat Torah. It must be that the Issur chulun ba'azara is midaraisa. Usreifas and midivrei. Maybe the sreifa itself, the chiv to burn it rather than to bury it, is midivrei seifert. Why would they insist that you burn it? Behema gozer, by behema they were gozer. Dilma also l'meimar kachim psulum l'kfura, because people can confuse it with kachim and think that kachim that was possible is b'kfura. But the Torah said kachim psulum you have to burn, and therefore once they made this gezerah by behema, which is also the shech bazar midaraisa, they treated chaya the same way, even though by chaya there wouldn't be a confusion between a chaya and kachim. They wanted to make a uniform rule. Anyone who's over chulun azara, automatically the animal needs to be burnt, even though there's really only a reason to burn the behema. The Rabbanan wanted to keep things simple. They made one gzeira that applies across the board to al chulun bazar. So with that question, ishtikul, these two people remain speechless because it seems that they now don't have a pshat in Reb Shimon. Why did Reb Shimon say that if you're mekadosh and isha with chulun shenishchut ubazar, that's the mikudeshes, here you see it's deraisa, ishtikul. So Mar Yehuda stumped Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shmuel. They were both quiet. Also, the Kamei de Rabbah. So they came to Rabbah. They were just about to enter the house. They were at Pischa de Rabbah, and they asked him, Armalu Palguk Minchi, Mar Yehuda, who's known to be a separator. Why is he a separator? Because he asks kashas and proves people wrong. Rash is countering Rogil Lachlik Al Chavirah. Yehuda was a guy who knew how to get you, and he knew how to ask kashas to argue. But he got you here. But really, you have a simple teretz. Where did Reb Shimon say that if you mekalish a woman with chulun shenishchadu b'azara, it's mikudeshes? It's only if the shchita ended up being a shchita she'ein ruya, because when they opened up the animal, they found out that it was a treifa. And we tap in to Reb Shimon's svar that we said yesterday as well. Reb Shimon l'tamei de Tanya, a shoichet is a treifa. If one checks an animal that's treifa, so the shechita didn't accomplish what it needed to, was to allow you to eat the meat. Or if you didn't know it was treifa before you shechted it, but after you shechted it and you opened it up and you did the bedikas, you discovered that it was a treifa. And you shechted, this animal was in the azar and it was chulin. Shimon mater bano. Shimon knows it's muter bano. You know why? Because it's a shechita she'ein ruya, and therefore it's life shechita. We don't look at it. We don't perceive it like it was shechted chulin bazar. It wasn't the shechita. It just died. and therefore it's mutter by no. So we have the Reb Shimon Shita. We have three Shitas of Reb Shimon that are different than what the other Shitas are. The Shita of one is Chul Shenishlu Azara, or Shchita Sheni Ruya is not a good Shchita. Petach Hamar is only also Mana after it's killed. And the third thing was that Basa B'chol was not also Mana. Sure, you could serve it to your dog, you could serve it to a guy, you can trade for meat, there's a lot of that. Gezok to Gemara Vayter. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Machron v'kiddush b'dmei mekudeshes. So we had a list of all these Issur Eno that if you try to be Mekadosh and Issur with them, it won't be a good Kiddushin. Yet, the Mishnah then says, all of these items of Issur Eno, if you sold them and the purchaser gave you money, their Issur do not transfer to the money. The money is yours, free and clear, and therefore you could be Mekadosh a woman with the money that you receive for selling these Issur Eno. Minolan, how do we know that all of these Issur do not transfer to the thing that you swap it out for? By Avodah Zarah, which is a severe type of Issur Ano, there the Torah told us, there it transfers. It says, Vayisa Cherem Kamoyu. It will be Cherem just like the Avodah Zarah. The Pasuk says, V'loisovi toyeva al beisech. Don't bring a toyeva into your home. V'yisa Cherem Kamoyu, and you will be a Cherem just like it. So we learn from there that Kol Shatom Mahayem Himena, anything that you create out of it. In other words, if you sell the Avodah Zarah for money, that money is what you made out of the Avodah Zarah. You created the money out of the Avodah Zarah. Or for that matter, anything that you would swap an Avodah Zarah with, Hareyu Kamoyu, it will have the same status as the Avodah Zarah. So the Issur of the Avodah Zarah will spread. It doesn't transfer because the main Avodah Zarah remains also. It will spread to anything that you swap out for it. Mechla, since it only says this by Avodah Zarah, we learned the Chalishun Shabbatayra Sharu. Fact the Gemara, you don't just say since it's in one place, doesn't apply anywhere. Adarabah, the norm is that when the Torah teaches us something in one place, we make a binyan af. And we'll say, just like this Issur Eno spreads, so to all Issur Eno spread. V'neilef mina. Why don't we learn from Avodah Zarah to all Issur Eno that the Issur spreads? Zakt Gemara, because the Torah didn't just tell us by Avodah Zarah that the Issur Eno spreads. The Torah also tells us by Shvius. And we have a rule that Shnei Ksubim Abav Kechad and Malamd. Because if the Torah wanted us to make a binyan af, why did the Torah have to tell us this by Shvius? We could have known it from Avodah Zarah. Toshus actually says you wouldn't have known Avodah Zarah from Shvius, but you wouldn't have known Shvius from Avodah Zarah, but if you would have known Avodah Zarah from Shvius. The Chol Shnei Ksubim Abav Kechad and Malamd. So Avodah Kechavim Hadamar. Avodah Kechavim, we just quoted the pasuk of Vayisa Cherem Kamoyu. Shvius Mahi. Where do you see that Shemitah also transfers to what you swap it for? Dr. Gemara, Yovel li kodesh tiyalachem. It's Yovel, it's Shemitah, and therefore everything is kodesh to you. Ma kodesh, toifes estama. Just like kachim, if you swap out money for it, the kedusha goes on the money. Af shvius toifes estama. Frank the Gemara, if that's the case, ima kodesh toifes estama v'yoytzel l'chulin. By kachim, if you're paid it, the kedusha goes onto the money, and the meat becomes chulin. Are you going to tell me that's how it works by shvius as well? If I sell peiros shvius, the kedusha goes onto the money, and the fruits are no longer peiros shvius? That's not true. Talmud loymar tiyeh aviyasa tehei. So now we have a paradox here. We have the halacha that it's tefeses tameh. Yet it also remains college. How does that work? Does it transfer over or does it not? Ketzat. So how does this work? Lagach b'peiros shvius basar. What if I swapped out? I gave somebody peiros shvius and they gave me basar. Elu ve'elu misbayir. Not only does the peiros shemitah need to be destroyed at the end when there's nothing left, so too this basar that you bought took on that kedusha shvius, and also has to be destroyed at the same time as the payers. But if I swapped it again, so come. But what if I took that meat and I swapped it out with fish? Then yatsa basar nechnusu dogim. Then the dogim that I received does get a kedusha shvius, but the basar loses its kedusha shvius. Bedogim yayin. If I then took these dogim that have kedusha shvius, and I swapped it out for wine, again it transfers. Yatsa dogim nechlas yayin. Yayin shemen, yatsa yayin nechlas shemen. Haketat. So what is the bottom line? Achrein nitbus v'shvius. The last thing you buy, shvius transfers to it, and periatzmai osur. And the original fruit of shvius also retains all of the halachas of shvius. That's how Shemitah works. Zok to Gemara. So we have shnei ksiv mabam kachot. We have Shemitah, we have avodah zarah, and therefore by all other Yisurim in the Torah, such as those listed in our Mishnah, such as Basar B'chala, such as Chulin Ba'azara, such as Orla, all of these Yisurim do not transfer. So we had a sheet who holds that Shnei Ksub Mabam Kachat Malamdin. So if that's the case, why doesn't this apply that the Issur transfers over? Why doesn't it apply to other Isurim as well? So tomorrow, because in each of these psukim, by Avodah Zarah and by Shvius, there's a special pasuk that says it only applies here and not elsewhere. Miyut eksivi, ksiv hacha ki cheiremu. By Avodah Zarah, it says ki cheiremu. Dafka Avodah Zarah, which is cheiremu transfers, but not any other Isurim. Hana. Uksiv hasam by Shvius yovel he in these items have this halacha that the kedusha the Issur transfers over. Media achrin aloi. But all other Isurim mentioned in the Torah do not transfer to anything that you swapped it for. And that explains our Mishnah, that all of these Isurim listed in the Mishnah, if you swapped it for money, the money is not usher, and therefore you could be mekadosh a woman with that money. Beautiful. Zok the next Heilige Mishnah. We're coming to the end. We're finishing Be'ez Hashem, the second parak of Kiddushin today. So we're coming to the end. We're getting to the last omid of this parak. Hamakadosh b'trumas u'maisros. Someone who's mekadosh with trumas u'maisros. The Gemara is going to tell us, the Mishnah is going to tell us, even a Yisrael who's mekadosh b'trumas u'maisros, he cannot eat truma. He doesn't eat maisros. It's not for him. It has to go to the kohen. It has to go to the Levi or b'matanos. If someone brings a carbon, there's a roya the chayayim and the keva of a shlomim go to the kohen. What if the Yisrael took those and was mekadosh a woman with it, or over mechatos with the water that they're going to use for the paraduma, or over ever par, or with the earth with the ever the paraduma, are raising the Kiddushin. The Kiddushin works. Vafilu Yisrael, even Yisrael who cannot eat truma, all he has is toivas hana. He only has a right as the owner of the teva to decide which coin it goes to. That's enough. That fact that I'm giving the woman can't eat it either. She's not a kohen. But the woman now has that power within her that she has a right to select which kohen it should go to. That's valuable, and therefore it's a good kush. Toivas hana is not mum. The mere ability that I have to decide who it should go to is not considered a value of money, and therefore you wouldn't be able to be mekadosh a woman with it, which is a direct contradiction to our Mishnah. Rababa asked Ula from our Mishnah, Hamakadosh v'truma yishuv v'maishus uv'matonos v'mechatos uv'eferpar harezim mekudeshes v'afilu Yisrael. What value is he giving her other than the Toivas Hana? Other than she could now decide who she wants to give it to. And if that has no value, so then where's the Kiddushin here? Amar Lei, Ula answered, Hacha b'Yisrael shenafnu like tefillin if his avi imei kohen. What is Toivas Hana ein moment? That's if I'm a balabos. I, Baruch Hashem, had a beautiful harvest, and now I separate Trumas and Maisros, and I have a right to give it to whichever kohen or Levi that I select. That value is ein moment. But here, it's a different thing over here. Here she owns it herself. Why? Because although he's a Yisrael, but his mother is a Bas Kohen, so his grandfather is a Kohen. And these are pairs that her grandfather grew in his fields. Now, even though his grandfather is a Kohen, he also has to separate Trumas and Maishros. But he doesn't have to give them away. He can keep them. So these were pairs of Tevel that he yarshened from his grandfather, his maternal grandfather, who was a Kohen. So let's think about this for a second. He yarshened Tevel. I'm going to explain in a second. He yarshened Tevel. So if he yarshened Tevel, now I have this Tevel. I have to separate it. Why is it any different than if I grew it myself? The teretz is because a Kohen who has Tevel, we look at it as if he had already separated the Trumas and Maishros. Once the Kohen separated the Trumas and Maishros, the Kohen was Kohen those Trumas and Maishros because he's allowed to keep them. So now I didn't yarshen Tevel. I yarshen Trumas and Maishros that belong to my grandfather. That's not just a simple Toivus Hana. Yes, I can't eat it, but I could sell it. I have a right to sell that. To mine. I yarshen Truma and Maishros from my grandfather. If I'm separating Trumas and Maishros because I have a chi of separation, I have a chi to give it to the Kohen. But if it was my grandfather's Truma that he gave me, now it's mine. Now I can sell it to anybody. That's worth money. She could sell it. Of course she could sell it. Yeah, she could sell it. So therefore, you don't have a raya from our Mishnah. The Toivus Hana moment.
She can sell it, but only
we might not be discussing Toivus Hana. We might be discussing Truma that belongs to her fair and square. She could sell it. I think what we asking.
Can you just clarify? She can sell it, but only a Kohen can eat it still.
Correct.
She can only sell it to a Kohen. No.
That's correct. She could sell it to Yisrael, but that Yisrael will also.
He can only give it to a Kohen.
She could sell it to anybody, any Yisrael who has an Edom who's a Kohen.
Oh,
it's just the same. It's the same benefit that if you have an Edom, a Kohen, or a Levi, you get to buy him a cheap aliyah. So too, you don't have to buy regular food. You could buy cheap food. You could serve him truma. You know, if you promise to support your son-in-law for 5 years in Koil or 10 years in Koil, he's a Kohen, you can give him truma. He'll say, hey, I don't want truma. It's too restrictive. I didn't say I'll give you chulun. I can give you truma. And truma costs less. So we're going to have a repeat. Toivus Hana Mammon, is Toivus Hana Mammon or not? He told them, Tinitua, what's your question? We actually have a Mishnah that discusses it. Our Mishnah. Hamakadish b'truma yisiv v'maishus v'mechatas v'efer para hareza mikudeshes v'afilu Yisrael. Amar lei. So Rav Huna told him, I don't understand. I'm sorry. So Rav Chia asked Rav Huna, v'lavu kivna b'Yisrael shenafn lo tvelim b'beis avi'ime koyin. How could you tell me? How can you? So Rav Chia asked Rav Huna, how could you be posted my shaila from Mishnah? Didn't you learn the Gemara? Didn't we learn the Gemara that the Mishnah is speaking about a case of Toivus Hana? It's speaking about a case where he yarshed the actual truma. Amar lei. So Rav Huna answered back, oh, you're a smart alehi. Hutza'at. You're removed. You're removed. What does that mean? You're removed. Ichsef. Right away, Rav Chia got insulted that Rav Huna called him removed because who sover mishmaitei kamerle. He does. Rav Huna said you're removed from your halacha, meaning you didn't learn right pshat. You don't know what you're talking about. Mutat mishmu zu nira she'ein ata chacham bo. You don't seem to be a chacham in understanding this Mishnah. Inami kat lekane ba'agman. You're a leidigiv. You run around just chopping down reeds in the swamp. In other words, you're a waste of time. Amalei. So Rav Huna said, don't be insulted. Chas v'sholem. I was giving you a compliment. Hachi kamina. Rav Asi the hutza. You're a hutza. What do you mean you're a hutza? You're just like Rav Asi the Great of Hutzal, who said what you said, and what you said is correct. And in fact, you don't have a raya from our Mishnah. Let's just say that maybe this machlokes of Toivus Hana Mammon or any Mammon is totally in a machlokes tonight. Hagoyin of Tivloi Shalchadek. You steal, one steals his friend's Tevel. Now, I'm not really being mafsed in the Trumas and Maishros because he can't keep those anyway. He has to give them away. I'm really only being mafsed him the chelik of chulin that would remain by him. Nevertheless, Rabbi says, Mishalom loy demei tivlei shel chavera. You have to pay the full value, not only of the chulin component, but you also have to pay him the value of the Truma and Meiser component that he's losing. Divrei Rebbe. I only have to pay you what you lost. You didn't lose anything else other than the chulin, so I'm not giving you more. But think about it. Did he not lose the Toivus Hana? He could have chosen which coin to give it to, maybe received a favor in return, and now he lost that. So that is the question. Is that called Mammon that is collectible if he stole it? So Ma'ala Bakamifli, the Mar Sovar, Toivus Hana Mammon, Rebbe who says you got to pay in full, holds Toivus Hana's Mammon. Not only do you give me my chulin value, but you also have to pay me the worth that I gain, the identifiable value that I gain, that I would have been able to select which coin and which Levi to give my truths and maestros to. Umar Sover, yet Rabbi Yosy Yehuda holds, the fact that you can select who you're giving it to, we don't put a value on that, and therefore the guy who stole that from you does not have to pay you back for that. Maybe that's not what this machlokes is about. Maybe the chula alma toivus is not ein mammon. Maybe everybody else it's ein mammon. And the case of the tevel that you stole is the same case we said before. You stole tevel that you had yashin from your grandfather, who was a kohen, and therefore the question is whether or not you own the truma. And what is the machlokes? The question is, do you say I yashin plain tevel, and therefore when I separate the trumas and ma'ashus, I have to give it away, and I have what's called merely Toivus Hana, and everybody agrees Toivus Hana in a moment? Or maybe we look at it like the trumas and ma'ashus had already been separated, and therefore my grandfather was already coining them, and the truma belongs to him, and therefore when I yashin it after I separate trumas and ma'ashus, those belong to me. And therefore they belong to me, and therefore Rebbe holds that the Ganav has to pay in full. And Rabbi Yosy Yehuda holds that we don't look at it like it was already separated, and therefore the Yerush, the grandson, is going to be separating his own Trumas and Maasros, and he doesn't own those Trumas and Maasros, he still will have to give them away. Or we can even have another option, how to understand this machlokes that would not lead to a conclusion about the Shail of Toivus Hana Mammon. And you can say the Chula Amo Kamisha Hor Mudam. And it's not speaking in a case where Yashin is from my grandfather. It's speaking in a case where I cultivated my own products. And the question here is, do you say that I own it or not? So Rashi says it's loved enough. He raised it himself. The time of the Rebbe. Okay, so let's stop a second. So really you could hold, and everybody goes, Toivus not in a moment. So if everyone holds Toivus not in a moment, so then why do I have to pay you for your truma and for your maestros? I should only have to pay you for your chul. Why does Rebbe say that the guy has to pay me in full? Shmuel says technically, when you're mafresh truma, you only have to be mafresh one little kernel. You don't have to be mafresh 20%, or 1 out of 40, or 1 out of 60. You could just be mafresh one little kernel, and therefore technically you're mafresh me all of what you stole in chulin. The Mar is like the Shmuel, Rebbe was like Shmuel, and therefore the guy has to pay me back in full, because we look at it like it was all chulin, because in fact I could have made it into all chulin. Umar less led the Shmuel. The other man holds that no, you have to give a minimum amount, and therefore you can deduct that. So Rashi asks, okay, that explains as far as the truma. But what about the meiser? The meiser is a fixed 10%. How does that work? So Rashi answers that we're not referring to meiser. Rashi is right over here. Rashi touches on the meiser. He says that meiser is lavdafka. It just means truma. He has to be meiser in full. It's only the question of the. It's only a question of the truma. I'll see where Rashi says that, but Rashi does say that. Okay, weiter. That's another option. Or maybe we have another shita. Everybody disagrees with Shmuel. So once again, why does Rebbe hold that the guy has to pay for all of the tevel? Let him only pay for the amount that would become chulin after the afrasha. It's just a knas. Technically, the ganav was only mafsadim, the value of the chulin. But the Rabban are counseling him, you stole it all, you're going to pay for it all. Maybe everybody holds the shmul. And therefore, the ganav should be mechuyev to pay in full. So why does Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda say that the ganav does not have to pay in full? The kansur Rabban l'balabayis. They counted the balabayis that you're not getting paid in full, even though me'ikar you should get paid in full. He should have never left his tevel without tikkun. We know there's a rule that a chaver will always make sure to be mafresh trumas and immediately, so that he shouldn't have tevel lying around. The guy didn't do it. Because of that, we count him, and we say the ganav only has to pay you back for your chelik achul and shabbat. Okay, so we have so many different options as to how to understand the machlokes. You don't have any raya from anywhere. You don't have any raya from anywhere that toivus hana mammon or toivus hana ain't a mammon. Dr. Gemara. Oh, so I said that Rashi says that this wouldn't apply to Meiser. That was in the earlier Rashi. The machlokes is by truma. If you could have only given one little chita. By Meiser he agrees, Rebbe, that Avadi doesn't have to pay back the full. Zok to Gemara weiter. Tanam hamekadosh betrumois uvemeishus uvematonois v'mechatos uve'efer para. Our Mishnah harezu mikudeshes. V'yachal pi Yisrael. Or in Midrash Gemara, I'll show you by mechatos and efer para. It's different. Anoitel schar lodun. If a dying charges to paskin dinav betelu, his piskei halacha are null and void. You're not allowed to charge to be a dayan. Lahayit, what if someone charges money to come and say testimony? Edus betela. His edus is null and void. Null and void. And now relative to us, lahadois, if someone charges to spritz on a tame, the water of the paraduma, or he charges lakadosh meimov to mix the water with the ashes, meimaora, lakadosh kama, meimov meimaora, the water that he created is meimaora, which Rashi teaches as serucha meim. We look at it like it's smelly water. The efra mikra, and his earth is not considered earth of a paraduma or ashes of a paraduma. It's considered just burnt ashes. It loses its value. So clearly, that's not a good thing to do. Clearly, you're not allowed to do that. So how could it be mikudeshes? And for the Gemara, there's a very big difference. Our Mishnah that is talking about being Makadish with Mechatos and Ever Para is the charge, the value of the charging of delivering the water, bringing it from wherever it's drawn and bringing it to where we're going to use it. Umila and filling up the koises. That's work that you're allowed to charge for. What you're not allowed to charge for is kan b'schar hazah v'kiddush. Just doing the hazah, mixing it, which is there's nothing really to it. There you don't have a right to charge for. Dekanami, and if you look at the lashon of our Mishnah and compare it to the lashon of the Brisa that we are asking from, you see the distinction. The katani hacha in our Mishnah it says b'meichatus uve'efer para. That will be a good Kiddushin. Those two activities you're not allowed to charge for. Let's see Rashi, who elaborates a little bit on it. The charges the shipping charges of moving the earth around from wherever you burnt the paraduma to where we need it, or schar mili hamayim, or the schar of filling up the water, the milso the tirchahi. That's something of relative difficulty, of relative inconvenience. The Torah doesn't force someone to do that for free. You're allowed to be paid for it. And therefore, if it's that value that you're using to be mekadosh a woman, it's legit. It's a good Kiddushin. There's no tircha there. He's taking schar for doing a mitzvah. That's not allowed to be done. Moshe told Klal Yisrael, I'm teaching you like Hashem taught me. Ma'ani b'chinam af atem b'chinam. Just like I was taught by Hashem b'chinam, and I'm teaching you b'chinam, so too when you teach others, it has to be b'chinam. Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish the second paragraph conclusion. Hadin Allah, Hish Mekadesh, Hadin Allah, Hish Mekadesh, B'neder, Hadin Allah, Hish Mekadesh, Ha'omer l'chaver. Someone tells his friend, say the Kaddish li Isha Plonius. Do me a favor, go be Mekadesh Rivka for me. And what did my friend do? He looked at Rivka. He said, hey, you're a nice woman. And he went and was Mekadesh her for himself, with friends like those, right? So the Allah is Mikudeshes l'sheni. She's legit Mikudeshes to the second woman. What if someone's Mekadesh a woman, but he said it should only be chal after 30 days? And someone else came and was Mekadesh her fully within the 30 days. Mikudeshes l'sheni. She's Mikudeshes to the second person. Bas Yisrael l'koyin. What if she was a Bas Yisrael and the second guy was a koyin? Because she's legit, fully married to the second guy. What if he said, I'm being Mekadesh you from now and after 30 days. So now part of the Kiddushin was tell now already. And here someone came and was Mekadesh within the 30 days. I'm sorry? What do you mean
Saying now.
From now until 30 days.
From now.
So it should start being chal now, and it should sort of develop into a full Kiddushin after 30 days. So Zok the Gemara Mikudeshes ve'einu Mikudeshes. It remains a suffix who she's married to. Is she married to the first or to the second? The Gemara is going to analyze the reason. Zok the Gemara. Therefore, if it was a Bas Yisrael Kohen, she wouldn't be able to eat Truma. If she was a Bas Kohen Yisrael, she also can't eat Truma. Because we don't know, she might be Mekudash, she might not be. And therefore, either way, she has to be Machmer, Loi, Soichal, B'Truma. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll be Mamshach Bez Hashem tomorrow.